Hey everybody, welcome to the show Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to the tabletop gaming hobby, and this is a video series looking at the game of Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. In this video I'm going to give you my final review of the game itself. But if all you're looking for is a quick overview, some sample gameplay, a tutorial, or even seeing the solo gameplay, check out the other videos in the series. This is 100% just going to be a review of the game itself. Come on back after the break. The game of Terraforming Mars, Ares Expedition, and just for simplicity, I know this is going to cause a little bit of confusion, so I'm just going to refer to this as Ares Expedition, and since I'm going to have to do some comparisons, I'll refer to the traditional regular game as Terraforming Mars. And yes, I'm going to also throw in a couple other references, so I'm also going to reference Race for the Galaxy a couple times, but it's going to make sense you want to start making these references when we get to those points. But the game of Ares Expedition is a engine building and an action selection game for 1 to 4 players. The basic idea, if you're not familiar with an engine building game, is the basic idea is to create what's called an engine, which means you're trying to get a whole bunch of cards into play, which will continue to produce resources. Once you produce resources, you're going to spend these resources on actions. The more resources you produce, the more actions you can take, and the more actions you take, well, the more victory points you're going to get. That's the basic idea of the way most engine building games work. Now, the thing that's really interesting about Ares Expedition, and something that's going to be very reminiscent to Race for the Galaxy, or even going back to the game of San Juan if you want to go really way back in the Wayback Machine, the interesting thing about this game is it adds an action selection game onto the very basic idea of an engine building game. Now, the cool thing about an action selection game is these games offer lots of actions every single round, but not every action is going to be available to every single player every single round. And the way that Ares Expedition goes about doing this is every single player is also going to have a secondary hand of cards which are going to give the players actions. Players at the start of every single round are going to pick one of these action cards they're going to play face down. Once all the players have placed it, we're all going to reveal, and that's going to be the actions all the players are going to take. Now, the cool thing is every single card that is selected, all the players take those actions, but the specific player who actually played the card always gets a very nice bonus. So the cool thing about action selection games like these, what I really enjoy about these games is the fact they let you get in the mind of other players. Anytime I can play a game where I get in the mind of other players, these are games I enjoy immensely. I don't know if it's just the psychology of it, or just the interaction, or just trying to decipher what the player across the table is doing, but these are games I always enjoy extremely much. They're games I enjoy immensely, and this game helps me get that feeling very well. And well, it's copying in a way the classic game Race for the Galaxy, and these are games that do the action selection very well, because it's very interesting to sit there and look at your hand of possible actions and think, okay, I know I need to take action number 2 this round, but I see this person across from me has like 0 resources, and I could also do the production action. If I do the production action, I'm going to get an extra bonus of extra 4 million credits. Yeah, it's not that great, but I actually have a lot of resources right now, so I could do a construction, get this card into play right here, because I know this person over there doesn't have any resources, so I know they're going to do a production. So they're going to help me by taking an action that I know that they really need to do on this turn. And that's what I enjoy about action selection games, getting totally into the mind of the other players. It's something I greatly enjoy. Now, what's interesting about this game right here is this has combined a little bit more of a board game with your traditional engine building and with your action selection game. And this is one major way that this game really diverges itself from the classic game of Race for the Galaxy, San Juan, or any of those classic action selection games, is because this game has a board that we're working through. And this board is the built-in timer for the game, which is very unique to a lot of these styles of games. A lot of the other style of games are more of a tableau building game, where the game is going to go on until you have a certain amount of cards in your tableau. Once one player has a certain amount of cards in the tableau, the game's pretty much going to come to an end, add up your victory points. Whoever has the most amount of victory points is going to be the grand winner of the game. What this game does that's a little bit different, and it's a little more evolved, is the fact that all the players are competing and cooperatively playing at the same time to terraform the planet of Mars. So all the players are spending all the resources to completely terraform the planet here, but they're doing it in a very competitive way, because as the players terraform the planet by raising up the oxygen, raising up the heat, slowly revealing the oceans, as the players take these actions are going to raise up the terraforming rating. Now the terraforming rating has multiple aspects to it, which is really nice and cool and very interesting, and a really unique twist to the game system here. Because as your terraforming rating goes up, your natural income goes up. As your natural income goes up, the more money you're going to have to produce more actions to raise up more of these levels, to raise your terraforming rating, to raise up your income. That's kind of a nice, cool little thing. It's kind of part of the engine building there, which is really nice. But your terraforming rating is also your victory points. So players are really in a race when they play this game because there are only so many oxygen levels you can raise. Once the oxygen level is raised at the max, you don't get terraforming rating for it anymore, even if you do the action. Once the heat level is all the way up to the max, again, you're not getting TR for it. So you're racing to make that happen. And even once the final ocean is flipped over, revealing all 9 of the ocean tiles, again, once that happens, nobody can get terraforming from doing that action anymore. So you have this cooperative, competitive, racing engine building game, which is actually a really nice combination. That's really, really good. And it's something I really enjoy. Now, this game is going to be compared to Terraforming Mars, the classic game, in a lot of ways. Some are going to be favorable, some of them not so favorable. One of the big things that a lot of players are going to notice immediately when they play this game is the fact that the artwork had an extreme upgrade. I mean, we're talking a complete upgrade over the classic game of Terraforming Mars. Terraforming Mars, as good as the game is, everybody can pretty much agree that the artwork in the game was not up to snuff. It was very low quality artwork. Matter of fact, the artwork didn't even match. You had some artwork that was more photo-like. You had some artwork that almost looked like Microsoft Paint stuff. You had some artwork that basically the artwork is all over the place. And that's something that's the first thing that a lot of players are going to notice about Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition versus the classic game is that the artwork is consistent and very, very good here. And not only that, something that a lot of players are going to appreciate is the iconography in this game is done very, very well. It's very simple to understand, it's very easy to teach other players, and it's very, very easy to understand what your cards do and a nice, easy visual. Back to the comparisons, that's one thing that Race for the Galaxy was an absolute failure at. Race for the Galaxy was one of the most obtuse games to try to learn because the symbology of the game uses doesn't make sense. I mean, if you play the game enough, and I probably have near 1,000 games of Race for the Galaxy under my belt at this time, if you include playing the Keldon AI, or just playing the online app, or just playing the card game itself, I have many, many plays with that game. And even myself, somebody who has that game rated in my top 51 games of all time, will tell you, the iconography is dense. Until you learn what the symbols mean, how to make those symbols interact, and all those things, until you do that, the game is a bear to learn. That is not the case here when it comes to Terraforming Mars. You want to put a card into play? There's your cost. If it has any prerequisite resource that you have to have in play, whether it's on the board, stuff that's been terraformed, or cards you have to have in play, it's listed right there. If this card is going to give you any bonuses, it's listed right here. If this card is going to give you actions, it's going to have a certain color background. It's going to be a blue card with a blue background, letting you know this card gives you actions during the action phase. Look how nicely this matches up. Action cards, action phase, blue, matches up perfectly nice. If somebody wants to say, when can I use this card? Look at your action card, it's blue. You know you can use that during the action phase. When can I put this green card into play? Oh, that's pretty darn easy. During the action, or during the development phase, it's green. Green and green, they go together. It's very, very easy to understand. How do you add your income? Well, anything that's on top of an orange background that adds to your income. Anything else is just a temporary resource that you're going to gain. Again, they did a very good job with the icons. The way the game explains itself and everything that's done here, they did a really phenomenal job just on how they put that all together. Ares Expedition also does a really phenomenal job of streamlining the game of Terraforming Mars. Let's be honest here, we all know that Terraforming Mars is an extremely highly rated game over on Board Game Geek for a very good reason. It's a very good game mechanically, but it's also a game that is not as streamlined as it could be, and Ares Expedition makes it even more apparent how much Terraforming Mars could really have been streamlined, because this is an extremely streamlined game. You have your simple board here, you have your simple cards. Players are going to put cards into play, whether it's going to be production cards or give them extra production, one-time action cards, or cards and give them extra actions, or whatever it's going to be. It's very easy to get your cards into play. You have your nice resources. You can track the amount of resources you currently have. You can track the amount of income you have. You can track your production. You can track your discounts. It's all super, super streamlined. Very easy to explain to other players. Very easy to understand, and it's very, very simple how everything works out. And it just works out in a very, very nice, clean way, which is done so nice, especially when compared to a classic game of Terraforming Mars. Now, unfortunately, for better and for worse, this game is also going to get a lot of comparisons to Race for the Galaxy. Now, while thematically they don't have a lot in common, Race for the Galaxy is a space-themed game. This is a kind of a space game, but it's all about terraforming a plan for humankind to move off a plate to move off of our planet and evolve as a species on another planet and go ahead and explore the rest of our solar system. So that's basically the theme of the game here. But mechanically, these games are extremely similar, all the way down to the point that you have 5 actions that all the players have access to. All the players are going to pick an action that's going to be available to the players that turn. All the players are going to be building a tableau out in front of them, which is going to give them resources. So the games have a lot in common, and they're going to create a lot of comparisons to each other. And some of the comparisons are going to be justified, and some of the comparisons are not going to be quite as justified or quite as accurate. But again, there are a lot of similarities between these games. Now, I am going to say that when we're comparing these games, though, Race for the Galaxy, just the base game, or even when we throw in the expansions, we might as well, because the game is old enough. There's been numerous expansions for the game. And yes, we know Ares Expedition itself is definitely going to have some expansions coming out for it. There's no doubt in my mind that's coming down the turnpike eventually for this game. This is a popular game. I can see this is going to be a popular game, and I can see this is going to be a game that a lot of people are going to enjoy. But my point I'm trying to make here when I'm comparing this to Race to the Galaxy and Ares Expedition here is there are actually enough differences between these two games that they can actually very easily stand on their own, and they will definitely stand on their own due to these differences. One of the big differences in Ares Expedition is the fact that every single player is going to start with their own corporation. This game has a vast amount of corporations, so many corporations that it's going to be nearly impossible for you to have the same game twice, whether you're playing 1 player, 2 player, 3 player, or 4 players, just because the vast amount of corporations come with the game. Now, granted, this is a Kickstarter edition of the game, and before we go anywhere, I should specify, because I know people are going to question this, this is not my copy of the game. This is a copy of the game borrowed from a friend of mine. I did not back this game on Kickstarter because I knew it was coming to retail. I knew if I wanted the game bad enough, I'd just pick it up in retail, and it's pretty darn cheap in retail. You get it for $35. I'm going to talk about that retail edition versus the Kickstarter edition in just a little bit here, including the fact that the retail edition doesn't have quite as many corporations. But ignoring their fact, there are enough corporations here to ensure there's enough replay. And these corporations play differently. Whether you get a corporation that doesn't give a lot of money, but gives you lots of benefits, or a corporation maybe that's going to give you a little more money, such as 40 or 48, kind of influencing how you're going to evolve your game. Are you going to evolve your game by having a large monetary start, which allows you to start producing various things? Or you can take advantage of your engine building that allows you to have a corporation that may get you to have extra resources such as heat production, plant production, but that's also going to be influenced by your starting hand of cards. If your starting hand of cards doesn't match up with the corporation too well, that can also influence what you're going to do. Because remember, at any time you want in this game, if you want, you can pitch your entire darn hand if you want. That can be 24 million credits since we start with a hand of 8 cards. And again, that can help you just start all over again and keep building that engine. So that's one of the cool things about this game, is that you do have a lot of replay potential just with the starting corporations. And one thing that is also really interesting, for good and for worse, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit here, is the fact that you have this board that players are working together on this board right here, trying to terraform the entire planet. It creates a completely different flow to the game. Instead of a game like Race for the Galaxy, where players are racing to have a complete tableau of 12 cards or a certain amount of victory points to go ahead and end the game at a time that's in their control, you have a game where players are competing competitively across this board right here, like I've said multiple times, try and get their terraforming rating up. And it creates a lot of positives and a couple negatives, especially in the lower player counts. And I'm going to cover the player counts in just a little bit. But before we go any further in this video, I want to talk about some of the things that I think is going to be very interesting to a lot of the viewers here. And that's going to be comparing these 3 games of Terraforming Mars, Ares Expedition, and Race for the Galaxy. What game would I, or would I suggest you buy based on the current circumstances on your board gaming collection and on your board gaming group? So the very first question that's going to pop in everybody's head is, would I buy this game? And the answer is no, I wouldn't. And it's not because it's a bad game. It's actually quite the opposite. This is actually a really phenomenal game. And if my current circumstances were different, I would be buying this game. Now, the main reason why I want to buy this game is because I own Race for the Galaxy and I own Terraforming Mars. Both of these games do enough of Ares Expedition's gameplay that I appreciate each one of them for different reasons. I like Race for the Galaxy for the simple fact that it is a very fast-playing game that plays anywhere from 1 to 5 players. Actually, I think you go up to 6 players if you get the expansion, so I might as well slow that in there. I like Terraforming Mars for its more longer gameplay that plays 2 to 5 players, where it seems like it's a much more longer evolved game where you can build up a much larger, more grand engine, which is where Ares Expedition kind of falls in the middle of. It takes a lot of the gameplay of Race for the Galaxy, a game that I already own lots of expansions and enjoy a lot, takes a couple of mechanics from that game, mixes them with Terraforming Mars, and it meets both the games in the middle. But I don't want a game in the middle that does 2 things good. I like Race for the Galaxy for what it does, because what it does extremely well. I like Terraforming Mars for what it does, because what it does is it does extremely well. This game is a blend, and that brings me up to my next point. If I didn't own Terraforming Mars, or if I didn't own Race for the Galaxy, which one of the 3 of these games would I buy? So I can say, honestly, if I didn't own any of these 3 games, and if I could only buy one of these games, I would buy Ares Expedition, because Ares Expedition is enough of the blend of these 2 other games that I know I enjoy immensely, that this is a game that I can keep in my collection and enjoy quite a bit. So if you're sitting here trying to compare Terraforming Mars, Ares Expedition, and Race for the Galaxy, I would say get Ares Expedition. This is going to be a game that you'll enjoy because it incorporates enough of both those other games to make it a great blend, and this is a really good game that stands strongly on its own. But, and this is going to be the strange thing, and this is the circumstance I find myself in, if I can only buy 2 of these 3 games, I would buy Race and I'd buy Terraforming Mars, because like I said, each one of those games on their own does the blend of Ares Expedition, their own half of that, much better. Race for the Galaxy is a much faster playing game. You can get a 2-player game of Race for the Galaxy in about 20 minutes. You get a 2-player game of Ares Expedition in about 1 hour and 15 to 1 hour and a half. You get a 2-player game of Terraforming Mars in about 1 hour and a half, maybe 2 hours tops. You kind of see the point I'm getting to right here. And that leads me to the third possible scenario that you may be in. What if you only owned Race for the Galaxy, or if you only own Terraforming Mars? Well, I'll just go in and cover the one easy one for me right here. If I only owned Race for the Galaxy, would I buy Ares or would I buy Terraforming? I'd buy Terraforming. Again, I've already covered it plenty of times, because this game is a blend of those 2 games, and I really just enjoy what those games do. But that's pretty much enough of the comparisons, because you came to this video to see a review of Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, and that's what I'm going to give you here. Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition is an extremely easy to teach game, easy to learn game, easy to play game that offers lots of strategies, lots of variety, lots of great potential for replay, depending on how you're going to play the game. The game is a much more tactical game, because the basic idea of the game is to as efficiently use these project cards in comparison or in companion with your current corporation in an effort to be the most efficient person in Terraform Mars. So it's a very well designed tactical game that offers plenty of replay, lots of variety, lots of strategy, lots of tactics. This is a game that's going to evolve with the player. The better you get with the game, the more time you spend with the game, the more you're going to enjoy the game, the more the combinations you're going to see, the more the tactics you're going to see, the more the strategies you're going to see, the better you're going to be at reading the other players and being able to look across the table and say, I know exactly what card that player is going to play, and it's a card I need, but I also need this card right here, so bam, these 2 actions are going to happen. It's going to help me a lot more than that player over there, and I'm going to win the game, because that's the goal I'm looking for in any game to play, have fun, and win the game. But having said that, the game does have a couple warts, and the biggest wart is actually going to be in the player count for this game, and that's one of the things that makes this game drop a little bit on how much I appreciate this game. This game is going to be extremely polarized when it comes to talking about player count, because one of the big things you need to understand about this game, whether you're playing 2 players, 3 players, or 4 players, the timer for the game never changes. This is your game timer. The game is not going to come to an end until Mars is terraformed. Whether you're playing 2-player, 3-player, or 4-player, the heat level, the oxygen level, and the ocean level is the exact same. That also means as you raise the player count, these levels are going to raise faster because you have more players throwing resources at the game. So that means at the lower player counts, this game can start to feel like it's wearing out its welcome, especially as a 2-player game. There are many times I play this game as a 2-player game that after about the 1 hour mark, I'm sitting going, you know, if we would have played Race, we could have played like 3 or 4 games of Race for the Galaxy by now over this 1-2-player game that we're playing of Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. And it's just because it starts to feel like the game is starting to wear out its welcome. Because in a 2-player game, it's basically I build my engine, build my engine, build my engine. Build my engine, build my engine, build my engine. Oh yeah, and I build my engine. Okay, now I have some resources to throw out the project of Terraforming Mars. Who's faster, who's faster, who's faster? Game over. Somebody won the game. And that's a way I don't enjoy the game, and it feels a little bit, I almost want to say anticlimactic when you play a two-player game, but as you add in more players, that feeling goes down and I start feeling the tightness of the game. I feel the strong strengths of the game because I feel like the game becomes much more of a race because the players have so many more resources. One player is going to flip an ocean, another player is going to flip an ocean, and you're like going, oh my gosh, I need to start raising up some resources, get my terraform rate up. And then this person is going to raise up their oxygen level or something like that, and you feel the stress, and the game still plays pretty much the same amount of time between a 2, 3, and a 4 player. The difference between a 2 and a 4 player game is max like 15 minutes difference on timer. That's literally how close it is between the 2 and the 4 player game. And that's something that I know is going to be polarizing to a lot of players. Of course, I wouldn't be negligent to fail to mention that this game does have a 2-player cooperative where players are trying to race against a time to terraform the planet in under 30 turns. And technically it's 15 turns per player, but I'm not going to get into the rules here. That's definitely not the point of this video. And then there's also the pure solo mode that does come with 3 different difficulty levels. And that is actually a pretty good challenge. And it's a good enough challenge that's actually enjoyable enough that I've actually played it multiple times and I actually want to keep playing it. Fortunately, it's not an option for me because I don't own this game and I really, like I said, I don't plan on buying it. But it is a game that if I owned, I would definitely play the solo game quite a bit because I enjoy the challenge and I've never been able to beat the hardest difficulty level. As a matter of fact, the second difficulty level, I'm at about a 50-50 victory level. So to me, it feels like a really good challenge. It's a good design and it's a solo game that helps you get better at the game itself because it's built around the basic game and it helps you learn the strategies, learn the combinations, learn the tactics so you can be a better player of Ares Expedition. Now, of course, we can't really go too much further without mentioning the fact that this was a game that came to Kickstarter and it's a game that came to retail. Actually, technically it came to retail before it came to Kickstarter backers, but you know, that's totally irrelevant at this point. So this is a game that has a definite difference between its Kickstarter version and its retail edition. And the differences are kind of infuriating for you, especially when you see the differences that are. The first big difference that's going to exist between the Kickstarter edition and the retail edition is the fact that the Kickstarter edition has resource boards. That basically means that if the table gets bumped, if that cube would land in its place, the table gets bumped, the resource cubes don't move around. This is kind of a nice thing, although it's kind of superfluous because you really don't need the resource tracker in this game because it's very easy at a glance to look at your current production and figure out exactly what you're producing. And that kind of leads me to my biggest gripe about the Kickstarter edition. Why did they make recess boards for the players, which is something that's always easy to recalculate? If this gets bumped, I can look at my resource and it says, yep, my heat income is 2, my carb production is 1, oh yeah, and then my heat is another 2, oh yeah, my carb production is another 1. Wow, that was pretty easy to fix. I didn't need the resource board for that. Guess what happens if somebody knocks over this board that's not recessed, where the terraforming ratings aren't marked in recess boards or anything like that? Good luck figuring out where your terraforming rating was. You might as well start the whole dang game all over again. So instead of making the board that should have been recessed with a dual layer board that allow you to make sure that your tokens for the terraforming rating for all of our players would be locked in, so one little bump didn't screw everything up. Nope, they did it for the player boards. What you see is really easy to recalculate when there's a bump, which is probably a really great thing because when you get the retail version of the game, this is not a dual layer board, so that means that you don't have the recess board, so your pieces will slide around. And also your current player board for the planet Mars itself is also not recessed. So when those tokens get moved around, yeah, we go back to the point where you're pretty much screwed if that happens. Now, my cynical self wants to blame this on FOMO tactics that they use on Kickstarter to make you go back a game on Kickstarter, spend a little more money than you would at retail, because they say, hey, look at these wonderful recessed boards. And then I realize that the board that they should have had resourced isn't. And then I sit there and think to myself, well, is this ever going to be a recessed board in here? And I'm like, oh yeah. In the eventual expansion that's going to come out, that's going to add a 5th player. Hold on, get your Macaulay Culkin face on. Because the 5th player expansion is also probably going to have a recessed board to take care of this problem eventually. Coming to Kickstarter probably about 8 months from now. Griping about the dual layer boards all set aside though, it is really nice to see that this game is actually available in retail, and the differences between the retail are mostly cosmetic, plus a couple corporations that are not going to be available in the retail edition. But it's not a big enough a difference that people are going to complain about the retail edition, especially when you know that you can get the retail edition for about $35, which is a great deal, considering the components are, besides for dual layer boards, are almost 100% the same. The card quality is going to be the same, the artwork on the cards is going to be the same, the cubes are going to be the same. The only thing you're missing out is I don't think you get the plastic tray in the retail edition, but sure, this plastic tray looks really, really nice, but we've been using our own plastic trays, those little clip trays that we get from various different resources or whatever resource you want to use. This isn't a big deal, and knowing that you're going to get this much gameplay for a 1 to 4 player game for $35 is a really great deal, especially with the amount of replay you're going to get with all these cards. I can definitely say that if you were kicking yourself about the fact that you didn't support this game in Kickstarter, don't. It's a little bit of FOMO to make you think that you missed out, but you really didn't. The retail package is going to make you more than happy with the game. The bottom line here is if you are looking for a engine building action selection game and you don't own Race for the Galaxy and you don't own Terraforming Mars, I can highly recommend that this is a game you're going to want to pick up. It's available for a great price. It's got some great components. It's got some fantastic replay. It's got some fantastic variety. Single player, cooperative play, 2 to 4 player gameplay. What more is there not to want in a great engine building, action selection, tableau building game? Good components, good artwork, a great game that plays pretty darn well in an hour and a half and then plays pretty darn decently from 2 to 4 players. Besides a couple things I mentioned about the lower player count, gameplay can kind of overstay its welcome. There's not much else to say that's really negative about this game. It's a greatly designed engine building game for 2 to 4 players. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this video series. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them in the YouTube comments down below. I'll definitely get to them as quickly as I can. You can also feel free to email me off the shelf board game reviews. That's otsbgr@gmail.com. I'll definitely get your email answered as quick as I can. If you enjoy this video and the content I produce on the channel, think about supporting the channel over on Patreon. Patreon backers get access to videos that are only available to the Patreon backers and only cost you $1, and that dollar helps keep the channel growing strong with new content, new videos, and new games. If you enjoy this video, series, click that like button, click that subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching.